everybody. It is Amber Knieling here again. They did not kick me out yet, which is very exciting. And I am joined with Pastor Josh Party.
Hello. How are we doing?
Welcome back.
Why, thank you. Thanks for having me on your show. So appreciate it.
Love you. Love your show. Thanks.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Great. It's great. I'm back, though, so yeah. I'm not off the air. Okay, so last week we brought up a couple of questions that maybe some of our congregation or people who visit or whoever come up with. It's kind of some general questions. Last week we talked about baptism, and I gave you the task of answering said question below 5 minutes.
Correct.
I re-listened to this podcast.
How did we do?
And I timed you.
Okay.
And you were at 5 minutes and 7 seconds.
So close.
That's really good, though.
That is, yeah, that's really good.
Like, considering.
Yeah, I'm pretty proud of that, but there's some room for improvement.
There is.
I really need like a clock here with me that I can see.
You do.
That would be helpful.
It's called a watch.
Yeah, I don't. I have a cell phone. I don't wear watches.
Yeah, that's legit. Okay. So this question today is, how do you come up with sermon series? So we have so many sermon series that happen throughout forever.
Yeah.
And
sermon every week.
Every week. Yeah. And so how do you guys come up with that? I'm sure a lot of our listeners, a lot of our viewers, a lot of our congregation, that they have questions about that. They might even have ideas about that.
Sure.
But I think this will give us all insight on you letting us know how you come up with them.
Yeah.
So again, 5 minutes and go.
All right. I mean, I would say there's always, we want to start with, like, there's components of prayer and thinking about, right, and understanding and the work of the Spirit. So I want to spiritualize it in that sense. I don't want to over spiritualize it either. It also comes out of just knowing who we are as a church and maybe things that are going to be on the horizon to talk about. So those are factors that weigh in. When I think about teaching series, there's lots of different ways to teach, right? Like and usually I should say we all connect with different types of teaching, or we have our different preferences. So some of us like more exegetical, which is kind of like verse by verse, or that's really even expository preaching. Some of us like more topical, like, hey, let's talk about the topic of marriage or kids or whatever it may be. Some of us like going through whole books. We all come into this space. We all learn differently. We all have different things that we're thinking through. So I would say what we want to do here at Hopevale is we want to be well-balanced, right? Like kind of a well-balanced diet. So far, I mean, I've been here about 6 months now, right? But we've taken time to do a series on the fruit of the Spirit and just kind of, hey, let's take each one of these topics for a week and talk about what this means. We did a deep dive into the book of James where we were a little bit more expository. We didn't go through every verse, but we kind of worked our way systematically through the book. We did a series on the Lord's Prayer, which was very theological and just talking like big picture. What does this mean? And telling kind of the big story of Scripture throughout. And then, now we're in Advent season and telling that story. So I think that's kind of what you could expect moving forward is we're going to do a variety of types of teaching. So sometimes we are going to work through a book of the Bible because we want to be jumping in and learning how to pull together. And we want to be processing the same things. Other times we're going to zoom out. Sometimes we're going to cover specific topics that we feel like are relevant to our lives right now. And what does the Bible have to say about this or that or all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of how I would frame it. And I think that's helpful. You played sports, right? You played volleyball. Did you play any other sports? I know you played volleyball.
Soccer and basketball.
Soccer and basketball. So I played sports, and when you play sports, you'll work on all these drills that they don't seem like they have anything to do with the game necessarily, right? Like maybe it's even going to the weight room, or it's running long distances, or little technical moves where you'll just work on like 2 steps, like 2 quick steps or whatever. And you work on them and you incorporate them into your skill set. And it's not even something you maybe use very often. But then you'll get into a game, you'll get into a situation where all of a sudden it's like, oh, your body just reacts and you do that, right? I think that's maybe a helpful way to think about teaching and preaching. So we all have our favorite style that we relate to or we prefer. But there's also these ways that we can maybe there's going to be things that come in our life in the days ahead, the years ahead, that we aren't even on our horizon right now, that actually the Spirit's at work in our lives right now, and he's stirring our hearts and minds, and he's preparing us for what's coming in the future. And so it's kind of like the idea of, another analogy, if we're going to mix analogies, is like the well-balanced diet, right? Of just like making sure that we can talk about Scripture as a whole and understand the whole story. We can zoom in and get really practical into one story. We can apply this to our daily lives and different topics that we have. So that's kind of how we're going to do it. Even like a little bit more behind the scenes, one of the things I kind of brought here with me is we have a teaching team, right, that kind of helps. And we have actually a meeting that happens every week where we gather together, and we're kind of working about a month out on whatever the topic is. So whoever the communicator is that day kind of sits down and walks us all through, okay, here's what I'm thinking, here's where I'm going. We'll ask questions. We wrestle with the text. We wrestle with different ideas. And that's just a way for us to allow God to kind of start stirring in our hearts and minds as the people who are leading and teaching the things that he wants to be doing in the larger church, and bring some more voices into that. So that's kind of a little even behind the scenes if people are curious, like, well, how does this look like? That's some of the stuff we're doing that you don't see during the week as we prep and trust that, God's going to use that for his kingdom and for good. So
yeah,
there you go. Was I under 5 minutes?
I don't know.
You don't know.
I didn't time you. I'll time later. But I did have follow-up questions.
Yeah.
And one of my follow-up questions was, how far in advance do you guys plan? So you answered that.
Yeah, we're about a month out with the sermon. I mean, it does vary a little bit based on the season. And then sermon series, we're usually 3 to 6 months out of where we're going. So.
Right. Okay. And then this might be too in the weeds kind of thing, but do you like stagger, okay, we'll do a topical series this time, but we don't want to do like 2 topical series in a row? Like, do you try and stagger it like that? Or do you not even, or do you just let the Spirit lead whatever you feel like?
It's a great question. I would say I would want to hold it open and loosely. It's definitely something that's on my mind of, okay, what was the last series, as we're thinking of building successive series. Okay, so we just came off of, so if we're just kind of like time stamping this moment, we just came off of Lord's Prayer. That's more me teaching and more theological, big picture, what's happening. All right, let's move into Christmas. I'm going to be a little bit less teachy and a little bit more preachy, right? Like, and but it might be that we just feel like, we're going to spend a year just going through just this book, or a year just preaching, or a year just teaching. Like, that could all vary. It's definitely part of the questions that we factor in, or the thoughts that we factor in when we're thinking about future stuff. But it wouldn't necessarily, it's not like, well, we can't do 2 in a row of this or 2 in a row of that. So, that's a great question.
Cool.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of more questions that people might have, but those were the 2 top ones that I had. Well, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for asking.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And that is a little behind the scenes. I've been in one of those creative meetings that you guys have. It's quite humorous at some points. It's quite fun. But anyway, so yeah, thank you guys so much for listening today. I hope this answered a couple of your questions. If you have any other questions, I'd say go ahead and find Josh right in the lobby. He'd love to talk to you about some of those. But next week we'll cover a new topic and hopefully give you guys a little more information on how Hopevale works. But until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and we will see you next week.